Welcome to Stay Reformed, a podcast discussing a variety of topics from a confessionally Reformed Baptist worldview. I'm Garrett Shepard.
And I'm Bobby Miller.
And with us today, we have a special guest, and we are super excited to have him. Chris, thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Chris, what's your title with your ministry? I don't want to misquote it here.
I guess probably the best way to put it is I'm the founder of it.
Supreme leader, is that?
The supreme leader.
Chancellor.
That sounds great too. We'll go with that.
Yeah. So Chris,
there's no humility there, right?
Chancellor Chris Perry.
So humble. So you run a directory here in the great state, Mountain Mama, West Virginia.
I do.
But before we get into that, would you be willing to kind of give our listeners an idea of who you are, your testimony, things like that?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a husband. I'm a father. I work as a critical care respiratory therapist. I was essentially raised in the church. I think most people in West Virginia can sympathize with that. They were raised in the church. I was raised primarily in what people may know as the Christian church or the Disciples of Christ. At age 12, I was inspired by a cousin's baptism, got baptized. There was no spiritual life with that at all. It was just kind of an act. I would go, like we talked about earlier, to tour in a few bands. And eventually, the Lord convicted me of my sin around the time I was about 18 years old. Came to the Lord, came to the Doctrines of Grace soon after that. Was not able really to find a church. And knew I was in trouble immediately whenever I believed these things, and I knew I needed to be shepherded by men who taught these things. And so it was a struggle for a couple of years, and thankfully the Lord was kind and sent me friends who had the same experience as me, a host of friends, and that kind of comes into where we're at now. I created the directory for people like me, and I don't feel like anybody should struggle to find a church, but sometimes it's really hard to find, a Reformed church. It's not on the sign. A lot of times it's not, we hold to the Doctrines of Grace, so we're not Calvinistic kind of thing. So this is just a way of me, helping with that. So,
yeah, I would say growing up in rural West Virginia, because I grew up not far from where you are. And I remember, I don't really remember being taught that Calvinism was wrong. I just don't ever remember it being taught. And I even now, going back, talking to friends, some people that I know that are still in the area, Calvinism is not well taught. It's not in a lot of ways well received. And so I really appreciate this directory.
That brings me to what you were saying, there was a pastor that I talked to about being on the directory. He is by all means a Calvinist, in quote. He does not like that title. And I think I agree with him that people in the Logan area would not receive that title well, because all they think are, we're puppets and gods, the puppet master, we're robots, whatever. The only times I've ever heard that was in, those negative terms. I had a Western Civ professor when I was in either high school or college. I cannot remember. So long back now. I'm old. That he was a Free Will Baptist pastor essentially, and we got to the Reformation, because you can't talk about Western Civ without the Reformation. And he essentially was saying, well, there's no love in this, there's no grace in this, and I can remember when I first came to the Doctrines of Grace, I remembered all that, and that was really hard to get out of my head. So, but that is the kind of the field, spirit of Calvinism, Reformed theology in Logan, where I'm from.
Yeah. And I would say, because I'm from Greenbrier County, and I would share that thought about down there. I think there's a growing community of people down there who have come to the Doctrines of Grace and understand what it really is. Because I do remember in high school there was a pastor who taught that the same thing that you're saying, that it's not loving, that it's an evil God who is sitting up in heaven just saying, like, yes, I'll take you, no, I won't take you, yeah, you'll be a good person, I'll take you, and so I definitely can feel for you in that aspect.
Yeah, I feel like the majority of West Virginia is like that, especially in the smaller communities, where there's not much emphasis on doctrine.
Yeah.
And it's more so about experience and how you're feeling,
Yeah. Doctrine is like a bad word.
Yeah.
I don't do all the doctrine stuff.
We talked about that with Dr. Tom Askell, where he was talking about soul competency, that idea that it's just simply experiential Christianity and not doctrinal.
What did he say? If you try to read the Bible without doctrine, you're not going to have a lot to read, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, doctrine's all over the place.
He's spot on for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of doctrine, so the churches that are listed on the directory, is there like any specific, and I guess we should probably put the name out there of the directory.
Oh, that might help.
Yeah, because we're just kind of talking here.
This ethereal directory.
That's right.
Exists.
So it's the name of it is the Mountain State Directory of Sovereign Grace Congregations. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So with that, is there any like specific criteria that makes churches eligible for that network? Like, for example, like we've talked about the doctrines of grace. Is that sort of the entry point? Do they have to be confessional? Do they have to hold to a historic confession? Like, what's that look like?
Well, I mean, our distinctives are that we do, list, Reformed, Calvinistic, Sovereign Grace churches, but the kind of uniting doctrine that I see pastors from different denominations and traditions in West Virginia come together and have conferences, and they host each other at their church. It's the doctrine of sovereign grace. And so I didn't want to do a strictly Baptist or strictly Presbyterian or strictly Anglican directory, because if I did, I'd probably have 4 churches on there. So, but yeah, so these churches, I essentially narrowed it down to this: you have to hold to the doctrines of grace, you have to hold to the 5 solas of the Reformation, you have to be orthodox in your Christology, so you have to hold to Nicene Christology, and you have to be evangelistic. And so that cuts out, of course, the hyper Calvinists and a handful of others that would maybe agree with the first 3, or that I couldn't in good conscience recommend their church. So
how right now are you the only one that's kind of vetting that? How's that looking?
Yeah, I've got a few guys that are helping me and that are praying for me, that are pitching ideas and contributing. Got guys with some blog ideas. We really wanted to get a blog out there this summer that really focused on the state of Christianity in West Virginia. So I've got a few guys who are contributors, but for the last 4 or 5 weeks now that it's been up, it's been primarily me trying to get a feel for how it's going to go. But I do have people that are helping me out. Yeah.
I also think it's important at this point in the conversation, if someone's listening and they're not from West Virginia, I think it's important to say that West Virginia is a state.
Yes.
We are not Virginia.
Yeah.
We are our own state since 1863.
Mm-hmm.
Just clarification. We also have
had a birthday.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We just celebrated it just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
June 20th. Yeah, I will say we also have some listeners from Australia.
We'd love to have you. Come on down.
Yeah, come on down.
In the words of Jim Justice, come on down.
West Virginia is a state. That's all I have to say.
Yes.
So those churches on that directory, is there like a formal process where they have to submit stuff, or do they just email you? How does that, like, to get put on that registry? Is there any paperwork they have to fill out, or is it pretty just the email?
Well, there's been essentially 2 ways of doing it because we're so new. The first way I did it was essentially I found these churches, I introduced who I was, gave them all the FAQs, all the information they needed for it. So that was the first way of doing it. That doesn't really work anymore because I've got so many on there now. But there is a directory application that you can go on there and you can submit your church. You submit what confession, statement of faith you hold to, what denomination, church network, tradition you're a part of, gives the basic information of the church, the pastor's name, the address, email, phone, website, social media, everything that's really basic so we can show, give a good profile listing of your church. So that's the way we do it now, is through the directory application.
Awesome. And then do you like reach out to them and kind of build a relationship now?
Yeah. So whenever I get one, I usually will set up a phone conversation just to introduce myself and tell people what I'm doing. If they have any questions about it, they can ask me. Normally, every phone conversation I have ends up being an hour or 2 hours long, and it's a great way to connect with people. And so I've been very blessed. Made a lot of new friends, and so it's very 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 blessed time for sure.
Listen, if there's one thing Calvinists know how to do, it's how to talk.
Yes. Yes.
Have very strong, not arguments, but conversations.
Conversations. Yeah. So what I know you said you're thinking about doing some blog stuff. What's your goal for this directory for your ministry? What's the kind of the 5-10 year plan for the ministry?
Yeah, well, ultimately, it's really just to connect people with churches, solid churches in our state. That's the big thing. On top of that, to make corporate connections as well, to make pastors aware of other pastors and churches aware of other churches. I wish that I would have done this sooner, because I've had so many pastors who said for years, I wish I knew somebody that I could meet with. I feel like I'm the only one. And then, I roll this directory out, and they're like, I didn't know this pastor was a county over or 2 counties over. And so really it's to connect people. But also, and I'm stealing this phrase from John Snyder from the Behold Your God study. If you all ever seen that, wonderful study, but to help West Virginia rethink God biblically. That's kind of the plan with the blogs. We really want to kind of blog on West Virginia Christianity. We want to partner with missionaries to show where there are dark areas in the state that have no churches, where churches are thriving. We want to partner with seminaries and denominations, which I can't release it yet, but there are 2 big seminaries that I just partnered with. I'll be releasing that on Facebook.
Awesome.
So essentially what we've done is we've connected our job board with their internal job board, so we can bring solid ministers, gospel ministers, into the state of West Virginia.
That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah. So it's been just wonderful. Like the whole time, the Lord has really blessed this endeavor, and
I don't even know how I came across. I think maybe someone shared it on Facebook. I was telling somebody yesterday, I don't even know how you and I got connected. I mean, it's through Facebook somehow, and either way, we're very thankful for your ministry.
Yeah, we are.
We as West Virginians, won by
choice and won by birth.
That's right. Yeah. But proud West Virginians,
that's
nonetheless.
Right.
That's right.
We're thankful for this, and not even just as Calvinists. It's just as Christians, we think things like this are really important to push biblical doctrine in our state, because we see the status of a lot of the churches around us and in within our state, and some of the outside voices and doctrines that are I would say infecting our churches. And so we're really thankful that you are pushing that biblical doctrine and connecting churches and things like that. So we're thankful for you, brother. And if there's anything that our podcast can do for you, do not hesitate. We would love to help out in any way possible.
I appreciate that, brothers. Really.
I'd love to kind of switch the conversation,
Sure.
Semi away from the ministry for a minute, and just kind of talk about, we're talking about this idea of fellowship amongst multiple churches across denominations. So why is fellowship important? Why ought we pursue fellowship with other churches?
Yeah, I think it's important because the Bible says it's important. You cannot read Hebrews and come away with saying, "Oh, I don't need a fellowship. I don't need to really meet with my brothers and sisters on a weekly basis." So fellowship's important because it's a means of how we're sanctified. It's a means of how we encourage one another and exhort one another in the faith. It's a means of how we become more like Jesus, essentially. It's God's means, essentially. So that's why it's important. That's why I'm pushing this directory to get more Christians out there who they don't have anybody to fellowship because nobody believes the way they do. They don't feel welcome anywhere. And so here's the place that says, hey, here are churches. You're welcome to these churches, and let's have a wonderful time. Let's pray together. Let's eat together. Let's worship together. All the things.
And I've been in the context where, especially when I first came to the Doctrines of Grace, I was in a context where Reformed theology was, I mean, evil.
Disdain.
It was like when I say the phrase Reformed theology is evil, like that was a direct quote from multiple people in the church that I was in. And so I understand that, that like conflict. So, we're not saying that you have to belong to a church that has to teach Calvinism week in and week out. But if you're in a place where it's taught that it is evil, that it is unbiblical, that it is damning, that it is all these things, like I just think that the reason that fellowship is so important is so that we can support one another, especially in these biblical doctrines.
Yeah.
Or were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, it's so interesting how people just have this caricature of what Calvinism is, this idea that God's up there pulling the strings and we're just puppets, when really that's determinism. So if we're going to represent the doctrines of grace right, I think it's important we're looking through a biblical lens. That was all I was going to say.
Yeah. Amen.
So have you, I'm just curious, this is, a question off the cuff. Have you faced any opposition yet?
I have, yeah. I have, and not from Arminians at all. That's kind of what I thought I would face immediately.
That's what you're gonna face.
yeah. That's exactly what I thought I would face. Immediately posting that out there, like the word sovereign grace, the word Calvinism, it's directly right there on the logo, or sovereign grace is on the logo. But then underneath it says connecting Reformed Calvinistic Sovereign Grace Christians with local churches. So I was expecting the battle of Arminianism versus Calvinism of West Virginia to happen, any day now. But it's not. I've had some backlash from theonomists and Reconstructionists and Christian nationalists because I have not added them to the directory. That is a completely different conversation in itself that would take days to talk about because of my personal history being mentored in the Reconstructionist movement years ago when I came out of dispensationalism, because I was a MacArthurite. That's what I was before. And I always have offered them to let's get coffee, let's get dinner. Let's talk about this in person, because a lot of these guys are pretty local, but nobody's ever taken me up on that offer. So I've kind of thought, maybe they just want to kind of cause a stir. But I'm always open to talk with anybody about why I don't list certain churches. But that's been the backlash so far.
Yeah,
so far, yeah,
that makes sense.
So far, yeah. We're only 4 to 6 weeks in, so. Yeah,
there's plenty.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm expecting that. So, but that's primarily the main hate mail that I've got so far.
Right. So it is interesting. Garrett told me a little bit about this. So you go to a PCA church, is that right?
I do go to a PCA church. Okay. Yeah.
Please explain, sir. So you're a Baptist, at least. Well, maybe we'll get into which confession you would say is the best.
I may have told him.
Yeah. I had some information leaked to me, but please explain, sir. PCA.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I don't even really know where to begin with this. I'd been thinking about this for a little bit. I think the best way to start is that I started attending a Calvinistic Reformed Baptist church in the Charleston area back in late 2013. And I was a member from 2014 to 2022. It was a blessed time there. I was very blessed to be involved as much as I could. The last, my wife and I were married in that church, and it's got wonderful historical Calvinistic ties, especially the guys like A.W. Pink, who wrote to the pastor of that church. Very cool letters that I have in my Dropbox that were copied and sent to me. It was wonderful. the last 5 years were very hard on us. We felt that the church was getting very big. It was really hard to connect, and we weren't meeting as much. And my wife and I practically we weren't moving anywhere away from anything theologically. We were still, staunch Baptists, staunch Calvinistic Baptists, and but we longed for, prayer meetings and Bible studies, and let's get together, all day on Sunday. And they were moving away from that. And so we essentially, this is not me calling them an apostate church. This is not me saying that they're in the wrong, but this is more so of what we were needing. What kind of shepherding we were looking for. And so COVID kind of messed things up. It may have happened earlier. COVID was terrible on everybody. But my wife and I both work in healthcare. And so she does the family medicine side of things. I do the critical care side of things. And so, we really weren't able to, fellowship as much as we could. They had backed away from, meeting more often. And so it was really kind of we just needed our brothers and sisters more. And so they hadn't planned on going back to, the midweek meetings or evening services, anything like that. So we started looking around, and we found a couple small churches that were, unfortunately, they were ready to close their doors, and they ended up closing their doors. We met with them a few times. They closed their doors, and we were kind of left. Okay, where do we go? And that's actually where the idea of the directory started again. I was like, okay, I don't know where to go to church at all. Yeah. And so through the grapevine, a few of my friends who went to that Baptist church, they had actually converted to Presbyterian. And they said, hey, there's a small church. They're actually about to close their doors, but God has actually sent some times of refreshing to them. A dozen families or so really just kind of came in about the same time. Why don't you come? I was like, guys, I'm Baptist. I'm not a Presbyterian. And they're like, oh, but you need to meet with this guy. He's a really solid guy. You need to meet with him. Let's go out to dinner one night. So this is when everything kind of opened back up. We're not strict lockdown anymore. So I go out and meet with him, which is my pastor now, Pastor Andy Steyer. And he doesn't, there's no Baptist jokes. There's no pokes or anything like that. All very mature conversations. And I looked at him and I was like, if I come to your church, I may not become a member there. He said, yeah, just come, come and fellowship. It's fine. I said, but also, like, I'm not convinced of paedobaptism. I'm not convinced of Westminster covenant theology. Yeah, I know. Come and fellowship. We're your brothers and sisters. We have a lot more in common with you than we don't have in common with you. Okay. We get there. We're welcomed with warm, open arms. We had looked at another church in between that, but we just kept on coming back to that one. He wasn't in the pulpit, pointing at me, baptize your babies, He wasn't doing that. I wasn't we weren't the family that was getting singled out. He preached the gospel. He expository, expositional preaching, he always invited us to the dinners. He always invited us to come fellowship. And we, that's what we were looking for, this consistent meeting together. And so eventually, after much long prayer, sighs and groans, all the things, my wife and I, we had also been talking about it back and forth. We became members in the summer of 2022, and we've been there ever since. And, we're Baptists still, Credo Baptists, Yeah. But we serve there. We love the people there. They love us. They haven't kicked us out yet, so it's good. But yeah, that's what we were looking for.
In a PCA church, you can be a Baptist to be a member, but you can't be an elder. Is that right? Am I making that?
Yeah, you can't be in leadership, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can greet people at the door. I can clean the church. I can serve lunch and dinner, and
just as important.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I can participate in the prayer meetings. I can participate in our book clubs, our Bible studies, and I can speak. During that. You have any questions, any thoughts on this? They're like, "Oh no, he's the Baptist. You shut up." It's not that at all.
Yeah,
keep the Baptists in the corner.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend, my buddy Cecil. He's from Kenya originally, and he was raised in Presbyterianism, but he would say that he's a Baptist, but attends a PCA church, and it's a similar situation. It's just in certain areas trying to find a faithful church is the problem.
That's a very common thing from what I understand. Like I was talking to Andy, my pastor, about that, and he's actually originally from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, I believe, and he said, you would not believe how many Reformed Baptists we have in our church because there's just no Reformed Baptist churches around.
Yep.
And they're not like cordoned up in their homes because they're, just not wanting to come to the Presbyterian church. No, they're actually, involved and they're serving. They're not leadership, but, they're still able to, fellowship and, have that really what they need there.
I think a lot of that too, at least in the West Virginia circles I've seen, goes back to that disdain for Calvinistic distinctives.
Mm-hmm.
Like most Southern Baptist churches that I have been involved with, so maybe 4 or 5, there's been a disdain for Calvinism. And so like it's hard. I sympathize for these people and who are Reformed Baptist or Calvinistic Baptist and can't find that place to belong. So once again, that's why we're thankful for your directory and for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
To try and mitigate that or try to help those people that may feel isolated and left out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's the thing too. Like, if you would have asked me, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be a member of a Presbyterian church, I would tell you you're out of your mind. I would never be a part. I love my Presbyterian brothers. Most of my books and commentaries are all Presbyterian. I love them, but I'm not a Paedo Baptist. I'm not, a Westminster guy. I love many of the things that are in the Westminster Confession of Faith, but it's just not where I've landed. I'm not convicted of that. But that's a thing I wanted to tell other brothers. Like, okay, say there's just a Reformed Anglican church, but you're a Baptist in there. It's okay to go there. It's okay to go there in fellowship. Of course they have their own stipulations on what it means to be a member, but still check it out. At least you have brothers who have far more in common with you than the Pentecostal church down the street, which doesn't want to hear anything about your doctrine. It doesn't want to hear anything about your sanctification or anything like that. It's more so about your personal feelings and what gifts you're showing at this point.
Yeah. It's interesting because the Presbyterian Baptist thing, there's some, like, to your point, brother, there's so much that we have in common. It's just on two points. It's baptism and church polity is really the biggest two dividing lines. But I mean, that's
and we honestly don't. I'll say this. I think one of the reasons why I was so hesitant in going to the Presbyterian church is because for the longest time I didn't have social media, but when I did have social media, I was a part of a lot of these reform groups where a lot of these young guys, they were just speaking Reformedese, Calvinese, like
type stuff.
Yeah, and so like they weren't speaking like most of these Presbyterian churches were, and so they couldn't go a minute without talking about covenant children or things like that. And so I just thought, man, whenever I go to the Presbyterian church, like all I'm going to hear is this and this and this, and that's not the case at all. Every now and then, Andy might refer to the covenant and the believers' children being part of it. My wife and I will kind of look over each other and smile a little bit, but it's not that he's hammering us with it, and he's not pointing at us, So, but my expectations were definitely wrong on that because of immature guys that I had encountered online.
Listen, I still just what Bobby Bowden said. They can keep doing it their way, and us Reformed Baptists will keep doing it God's way.
That's right.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think a question I had, just kind of thought about this. What if someone were to want to start a directory in their region, their state, their area? What recommendations would you have, or suggestions, or maybe like just words of encouragement for them?
But pray about it. It's a long, hard endeavor. I spent many nights because I didn't have any fun starting off. Like, I'm doing everything out of my own pocket, and that's how I still am doing things. So make sure that you're able to, really support that with a website, and you have the time to do this. So, think about it, pray about it really hard. But also, man, it's so needed. There are so many churches out, or church directories out there, but that have really good, solid churches on them. Like 9 Marks has a church directory. The Gospel Coalition has one. The Master's Seminary has one for their for the churches that for guys who graduated from their seminary. There's a handful of others, but with the more common ones like 9 Marks and the Gospel Coalition, I think even Founders, maybe they'll have like a little like fine print that saying like, we don't endorse every church here. Not every church may be Reformed or Calvinistic. And when you go, and I've gotten a lot of my churches from those directories, and when you contact them, they're like, well, we're not Reformed, so you need to really figure out who it is before you go in, or it's super awkward. But I definitely think it's needed, because people need to go and they need to find a place where they can say, like, okay, every church on here is actually Reformed, Calvinistic in their doctrine. And that's what I wanted to make sure. I didn't want people to go to a church on our directory and then come away and saying like, well, this is not Reformed or Calvinistic at all. But how I would encourage them, just pray about it. Make sure you have the funds to do it, or else you're going to lose your mind. That's about really it. I mean, I do think it's needed, though. Yeah.
If someone wanted to find your directory, how do they find it?
You can find us on Facebook. That's probably primarily the big thing, which will eventually lead you to our website, facebook.com/sovereigngracewv. Our website is also sovereigngracewv.com, which will link you to kind of everything else that you need. It'll tell you about us. It'll give you any questions that you may have about us. You can contact us through it. You can find your church through it. There's also an exhaustive map that will even give you coordinates of certain churches that do not have addresses. So, and there are those. Especially there's one in Lincoln County.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we talked about Lincoln County a lot.
And go on down to where Squirrel keeps his truck and turn left.
Correct. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're going to find a pulpit supply. You're going to find a job board. And eventually we'll have blogs and hopefully things that will encourage brothers and sisters and help them connect and to raise awareness of Reformed theology, Calvinism, sovereign grace, the doctrine of sovereign grace in West Virginia.
Yeah,
biblical Christianity. Yes, yes.
That's what I like.
Yeah, but that's about it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, brother, thank you so much for
man.
being here today in this conversation. And I'm serious what I said. Like, if there's anything we can do to help you out, we are two semi-able men that are willing to help you.
I feel that on so many levels. Sometimes I don't even feel semi-able. Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying fully able, because sometimes it's one of those days.
Some days are better than others.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'm barely getting by some days. I feel like this morning is one of those too.
I've had one of those mornings too. So
yeah, especially now in this stage of life. I have two small children that don't like to sleep. So I think that affects the ordinary daily life too.
Who needs sleep?
Yeah, that's right. I guess my seizure threshold is pretty high, so we'll go with that.
Well, brother, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for having me, guys. Keep on doing what you're doing. I love it. God bless.